Psalm 37 is about trusting God in the midst of difficulty. It's a topic that I think all of us can appreciate. When the tough times come, when the storm comes along, learning ahead of the storm to trust God seems like the better place to learn it. Learning it when when the storm is already here doesn't seem like that's smart. It goes on and it's got a theme or a couple of themes that extend that idea of trusting God in the midst of difficulty. One is that the wicked will ultimately be punished. Another theme is that the faithful will ultimately be delivered. And I think we believe that, but sometimes it feels like our experience isn't that. In other words, it doesn't feel like the wicked are going to be punished. It feels like they're just getting away with whatever. And I'm trying to serve the Lord. I'm trying to be pleasing to Him. I'm trying to lead my family. I'm trying to be faithful in the church, and I'm trying to do what I should be doing. And yet here come the boulders and the timber and the just hard stuff every day. And it doesn't feel like deliverance a lot of the time. Psalm 71 and Psalm 94 share similar themes. It's okay, we're not going to do all three Psalms. And at first blush, even rehearsing what we've talked about so far, it might seem just academic and somewhat sterile. But I want you to hear me when I say that learning this lesson is very practical and so desperately needed before you enter the storms. And the storms will come. And sometimes what we think is now a storm is really not much more than a little rain shower. But the real storms are coming, and they come. And so it's good to be reminded that we can trust God in the midst of difficulty. I'm reminded of, it's been a lot of years ago because my kids were still little and living at home. I don't remember what exactly was going on, but Mom and Dad had flown up to see us, got the kids, and flew them back to San Antonio to stay with them for several days while we took care of some stuff. We might have been moving. Later, we're being told a story. Now, the story that the kids told us was that Pa, that's my dad, Pa took them flying, and they had so much fun. When Granny told the story, it did not sound so much fun. When Pa told it, it was about some pretty, not extreme, but turbulence that was north of moderate, we'll call it. It was pretty bouncy. And so bounced things around enough, Dad said he hit his head on the top of the cabin, and not like hurt, but okay, probably should sense down the belt to make sure we're all strapped in, make sure, looking in the back, that the kids are doing okay. And Pa and Granny both said they're back there just giggling, saying, "Do it again, Pa." Now, why would they not be afraid? Because Pa was with them and they knew they were okay. And what I'm saying is that this is the lesson that we know it academically, but we really need to be reminded of it. So experientially, when the storms come, we're ready. So, Psalm 37. This appears to be a teaching psalm. I say that because much like Psalm 119, if you don't know that, each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In 119, its sections are by alphabet. Here, each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's really not all that uncommon, but it's used much as a memory aid. In other words, the writer, by doing this, is essentially saying, I want you to hear this, but I also want you to remember it. It also, by doing that, it appeals to youngsters. So it's essentially saying, I want you children to learn it too. But the vocabulary of Psalm 37 is advanced. And I would argue that the exhortation is deep. And so the message is one that the young should learn and maybe commit to memory, but it's not for the young who still live under the shelter and protection of Mom and Dad. It's a message, it's a psalm for those who are a little more seasoned, we'll call it. Think about verse number 25. You've heard this passage before. Verse number 25. I have been young and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. If we put that in more modern vernacular, what he's essentially saying is, I've been around a long time. I've seen a lot in my years, but I've never, ever seen the Lord forsake anyone who put his trust in him. So the lesson title, if you didn't already make the connection, The Song of the Seasoned Soul. It's a psalm, but it's really written as a song, I think. But it's not a song for just anyone. It's a song, well, let's see if we can explain. If we were to take a poll, and it could be an easy, like raise of the hands thing, we're not going to do that, but just sort of imagine that we were, to ask what type of music each of you likes. I think it's fair to say we'd get a fairly diverse mix of genres. The young may gravitate toward, and some of you others might too, the young may gravitate toward pop. Those who are a little older may enjoy something with a little more rock flair, might enjoy a little Seeger. Those a little older may enjoy a broader selection of classic rock. Some might enjoy R&B. Some might say, I'm not much for pop or rock or R&B, but I do enjoy country. And I'll bet if we explored that a little bit, we'd find out that the younger ones tend to like the more recent country music, and those who are a little bit older tend to like more, we'll call it classic country. Although, these days they call classic country stuff that was in the 90s, and that just seems like it was yesterday, so I don't know how I feel about all this. Still others might enjoy classical music. It's probably a group that's shrinking, might enjoy some orchestra, symphony, perhaps even some opera, but likely that's not going to be a large group, and it's mostly going to be those who are just a little bit older. There might be jazz. My guess is that's another group that's going to be small and skewing older. And then there may be some who say that they like the blues. And that almost certainly is a small group and predominantly older. Why is that? I think it's because as we get older, our appreciation for different genres of music changes, deepens. Not for all of us, but for some of us. And songs that tell stories about life experiences, the more life experiences you have, the more you relate, even if the music itself isn't your particular cup of tea. As I've gotten older, my appreciation for different genres of music has grown. Songs that I really liked when I was younger are mostly still songs that I like now, but I've come to appreciate other songs that are more relatable. Because I'm older, I've had more life experience. What I'm suggesting, and if you've not connected the dots, that this psalm, Psalm 37, is a song that speaks to a more seasoned soul. It's not that the lesson is going to be altogether lost on someone younger. It's just to say that what you can process from the lesson is going to be less if your life experiences are limited. When you faced fewer storms, you don't know about all that can lurk within a storm. And so, the song of the seasoned soul. I want to suggest to you that not only do we have this sort of acrostic thing with the Hebrew alphabet, we've also got, if you're into music, you'll appreciate this maybe a little bit more. Just like a song, we've got time, tempo, and text. Text, if you're not altogether musically inclined, is the song's message. Sometimes it's in actual lyric, but sometimes the text of the song is not actual lyrical text. It's in the actual musical movement. It tells a story in a different way. Time has to do with the timing of notes relative to one another. Tempo is the actual pace of the song. Faster, slower. And so, keeping those things in mind, let's jump off into the psalm. Verse number 1. Do not fret. Now, this appears not only in verse 1, it's going to appear again in verses 7 and again in verse number 8. Do not fret because of evildoers, he says, verse number 1. Verse number 7, do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. Verse number 8, do not fret. It only causes harm. Can I suggest to you that I think this is a big clue about the tempo that God intends for our lives? The idea is to not get hot under the collar, thinking that somebody's got to do something. Cool down a little bit. Slow down a little before you do the wrong thing in the heat of the moment. But how? Good question. That takes us to verse number 3. Trust in the Lord. We're going to see this in verse 3, again in verse 5, and again in verses 39 and 40. Verse number 3, trust in the Lord and do good. Verse number 5, commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him, and He shall bring it to pass. Verses 39 and 40, but the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. He is their strength in the time of trouble, and the Lord shall help them and deliver them. He shall deliver them from the wicked and save them because they trust in Him. What he's describing with this phrase of trusting in God, trusting in the Lord, he's describing a very well thought out, calculated movement. Trust in the Lord. When everything is telling you that you need to do something to make the circumstances or the situation better, to take the situation and make it right. I need to do something. But he says, instead, trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. He's trying to get across this idea of absolute confidence, absolute dependence that He, the Lord, will do or direct what needs to be done. And by the way, I don't know your experience, but mine is it's usually not what I would choose to do on my own. But trust in the Lord is key. Trust in the Lord is the quintessential insurance policy to protect against fretting that he talked about before. Some of you remember Prudential had a claim or a marketing campaign that they had for years. Their logo had the Rock of Gibraltar. And they used to say, some of you are nodding your head, get a piece of the rock. And they would also talk about the strength of that rock, the strength of Gibraltar. You remembering this? What I'm suggesting is the psalmist isn't saying, get you some Prudential. He's saying, get a piece of the Rock of Ages and hang on to Him. In Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7, the Apostle Paul put it this way, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Did you catch the formula? Worry about nothing, pray about everything, give thanks for all things, and God's peace will guard you. One preacher put it this way, God will never fail the one who puts his trust in Him. Number 3, dwell in the land. Now you might think at first, what does that have to do with us? You're going to see this in verse 3. We see it again in verse 9, 11, 22, 29, and 34. That's pretty frequent. That tells me maybe I ought to pay a little attention, even if it's not immediately obvious what this is talking about. Verse number 3, dwell in the land and feed on His faithfulness. Those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. By the way, earth, land. See those as pretty much interchangeable. All right? I'm going to read land where it says earth. Verse 9, those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the land. Verse 11, the meek shall inherit the land and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Verse number 22, those blessed by the Lord shall inherit the land. Verse 29, The righteous shall inherit the land and dwell in it forever. Verse 34, wait on the Lord and keep his way, and he shall exalt you to inherit the land. This language, if you've not picked up on it, is not about geography. It's about inheritance, which means it's really about God's promises and about his faithfulness. And God is faithful. If you go back and look at that first appearance in verse 3, dwell in the land and feed on what? His faithfulness. That's the call. The text of this psalm describes overall the certainty. Translate that. The reality of God's faithfulness in spite of circumstances that appear to the contrary. And oh, how we need to be reminded of that. How often do we fail to see, even if we see it, to appreciate that God's faithfulness is certain and sure? And the reason we don't see it is because our land is being invaded. Our turf, our sacred spaces are being crowded. What about when our land has been invaded? And we're waiting patiently, or at least so we think, for God to deliver us, but he is not moving on our timetable. In verse 25, I already referenced this, but look again at it. This is the psalmist's eyewitness testimony. I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen. This is the eyewitness perspective of someone who's been around a while. But length of time is relative, isn't it? A few months is nothing unless you're a kid waiting on Christmas. And then it's forever. 20 years is really not all that long, is it? Unless that's longer than you've been alive. When I was in grade school, some of you are older, so be careful how you pick. We learned about a communist superpower called the Soviet Union. I went to school in San Antonio until when I was 10 years old, we moved to Germany, and then we were there until I got married. But we learned about this communist superpower called the Soviet Union. We studied maps that projected Soviet expansion and world dominance. But then 1989, the Berlin Wall came down. And by 1991, the Soviet Union was no more. And how long did we study about the Soviet Union growing and power and nuclear threat and potential of nuclear holocaust and all of that? And then the point is, and I'm going back to that time and tempo analogy, we tend, maybe you don't, I'll say I tend to acknowledge God's faithfulness in terms of time, but I trust it only in terms of tempo. In other words, I'm happy to trust in him as long as his tempo is allegro. The question is, can we really trust him? Christians say yes. But can we trust him when our land is being invaded? Can we trust him when our comfort is being crowded? Can we trust him no matter what the external circumstances? And Christians still need to say, not just in here, but out there where we live it, yes. In fact, if you cannot, then you do not. And so we must. Take a closer look at verse 37. Verse 37. He says, mark the blameless man and observe the upright, for the future of that man is peace. Do you see what he's doing? He's essentially laying a dare. He's talked about how that if we don't fret, if we trust in the Lord, if we dwell in the land and depend on his faithfulness, that we can trust in God, we can be confident in God's deliverance. But in verse 37, he's saying, and if you don't believe that, take a look, find the blameless man, watch him, mark him and watch him. Observe the man who's upright, watch him. The future of that man is peace, and you'll see it. Watch him. I dare you. Number 4, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. This is verse number 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. The idea that's being captured here, it's not unlike, sometimes we read what's in the text of our scripture. You know this passage, be still and know that I am God. We have a song, very soft, sweet, meaningful, moving. Did you know that language in the original tongue is not that? Be still is like when you tell your kids, be still. Be still and know that I am God. What I'm suggesting to you is the language here, rest in the Lord, wait patiently for him, stand still, be silent in utter astonishment, essentially frozen in awe, frozen in godly fear. What do you mean? Like standing with the Israelites, the Egyptians breathing down our neck, the Red Sea in front of us, mountains to one side and the wilderness to the other. Stand back and see the salvation of the Lord and watch the Red Sea as it parts in front of you. Watching the walls of Jericho fall. Who expected that? Expecting God's deliverance? Yes. But can you imagine both within and without Jericho? Stunned silence at first. Think about seeing God's Holy Spirit fall on Cornelius and his household. The way that it had fallen on the apostles at the beginning, signaling the inclusion of the Gentiles. He must have been dumbfounded. Seeing Saul, the persecutor, become Paul, the proclaimer. Rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for him. You see what a great God we serve? You believe how powerful he is? Fifth and finally, wait on the Lord. This happens in verse 9. We see it again in verse number 34. Wait on the Lord. Verse number 9, those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the land. Verse number 34, wait on the Lord and keep his way, and he shall exalt you to inherit the land. Here, the idea is patience for God's lead. To wait for God to lead. I remember years ago, and I don't know who the source of it is, who I remember telling it was my dad preaching, but he talked about a young fella who went out with this girl, and when they got to the car door, she just opened it and got in. And then when they got, after the date was over, when they got to her gate, she just opened the gate and went in. And then later when he called on her, she said, I don't think I'm much interested in dating you because you didn't open my door and you didn't open the gate. And he said, well, I would have had you let me get to it. Sometimes we don't wait very well. But we should be patient for God's lead. And then resolve to guard his lead. Do you understand what I mean by that? The idea of protecting his lead by following closely. Follow him closely, but let him be in the lead. Because he's God. He's the one that should be in the lead. I'm going to close with what is arguably my favorite text, certainly in this psalm, and that's verse number 4. I love 25. I love all those that we have looked at so far, but verse 4 is the one that just really gets to my heart. Delight yourself also in the Lord, and he shall give you the desires of your heart. You can read this one of a couple of different ways. One is, if I would delight myself in the Lord, then all the things that I want and pray for, he'll give to me. in due time. That's one way of looking at it. That's the way that people frequently hear Jesus' words in the New Testament, and I don't think that's at all what's being said here. I think a better way to understand it is, delight yourself in the Lord. How much? So that He is the desire of my heart. And if I delight in the Lord that much, so that He is my desire, my heart's one and only desire, then He'll give me the desire of my heart. Because that's what He does, is He gives Himself to those who would follow Him. Again, the preacher said, God will never fail the one who puts his trust in Him. By the way, one sort of passing closing thought. How do you marry the idea of peaceful living with a sense of urgency about reaching the lost? It's one thing to talk about do not fret and wait on the Lord and trust in the Lord and be patient. But when we talk about that idea of peaceful living, how do we marry that with having a sense of urgency when it comes to reaching the lost? Better stated, a sense of urgency with sharing the gospel with the lost. And the short answer is, we have to. I know that may not be particularly helpful on its face, but that's the answer. What do I mean by that? You cannot win people to the Prince of Peace when your life is filled with anxiety and fear. You can't. Nobody will believe you. You can't talk about peace that passes all understanding when you're a wreck. The God of the Bible brings order out of chaos. He does it from cover to cover. His children live lives of order and purpose and peace. What kind of life are you living? Are you living a life of anxiety and stress and fear? Or are you living a life of peace? That doesn't mean, by the way, there's no stress. That just means, I know He's got it. I know He's got it. And I can get comfortable with His having it.